Hello, my friends. In this video, I will show what Jesus meant when he spoke about wars and rumors of wars, earthquakes, famines, and pestilence. Are these signs of the second coming or of something else? These days, it seems like whenever there is a war or earthquake or disease outbreak, someone jumps up and shouts, "It's a sign of the second coming." Then as the years pass, it turns out they were wrong. This has been going on for centuries, even millennia. Could it be they're not reading the scripture correctly? In this video series, we've been going through the Olivet Discourse, Matthew 24 and 25, to unlock its mysteries by reading the text in its context. I've shown that the first part in verses 4 through 35 is Jesus' answer to the disciples' question about the destruction of the temple. We know this because of the parallel with Luke's gospel, which is only about the temple's destruction, and because Jesus ends his answer by saying, "This generation," the one he's standing among, "will not pass away before all he has just spoken happens." You'll find more details of all that in the previous videos in this playlist. But now let's read on and see what Jesus says will happen in the lifetime of his first disciples. Matthew 24, verse 4. "And Jesus answered them, 'See that no one leads you astray, for many will come in my name, saying, I am the Christ, and they will lead many astray. And you will hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you are not alarmed, for this must take place, but the end is not yet. For nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there will be famines and earthquakes in various places. All these are but the beginnings of the birth pains." When we read this text in context, Jesus is not talking about what's future to us, but what was future to them and is now in our past. Were there many who claimed to be the Christ, the Messiah of Israel? Yes, many. The first century historian Josephus lists at least 12, maybe more. Jesus says, "You will hear of wars and rumors of wars." Notice he says, "You will hear." Again, he's informing the disciples that this will happen in their lifetime. Which war is in view? Well, the war between the Jews and Romans, which took place from 66 to 70 AD, and which ended with the destruction of the temple and the city of Jerusalem. Remember, the destruction of the temples, what they asked him about. That war took place during the lifetime of his disciples, as Jesus said, "This generation will not pass away before it happens." Sadly, not many Christians today are aware of what happened in that war and what a momentous event it was for the Jews. I wish that all Christians would read Wars of the Jews by Josephus. It serves as a kind of historical appendix to the Bible, an epilogue. It shows here's what happened next in history, and it details how Jesus' prophecies came true. Prophecies like the ones he makes in this passage we're reading. If you can't read Wars of the Jews, at least read the Wikipedia page on the Jewish-Roman War. You see, it's partly because so many are ignorant of those events that it's easy to fool people into believing the twisted interpretations of this passage that are popular today. Jesus continues, "The kingdom will rise against kingdom." In Greek, there is no definite article here, so this could be read, "A kingdom will rise against a kingdom, and a nation against a nation," meaning the Jewish nation of Judea will rise up against the Roman Empire. That happened in 66 AD. Jesus says there will be earthquakes and famines in various places, and in the parallel in Luke, he also mentions pestilence, which is a disease outbreak or epidemic. In fact, we have historical records showing these things did happen in the run-up to the war. This book, The Fourfold Gospel by J.W. Garvey, is a harmony of the Gospels. In his commentary on the Olivet Discourse, he writes, "Great natural disturbances would constitute the third sign. That these preceded the destruction of Jerusalem, there is abundant historic evidence. Alford enumerates the earthquakes as follows. A great earthquake in Crete, 46 or 47 AD. One at Rome, when Nero assumed the manly toga, 51 AD. One at Apamea in Phrygia, mentioned by Tacitus, 53 AD. One at Laodicea in Phrygia, 60 AD. One in Campania, 62 or 63 AD. Do you see what this means? We have historical evidence that Jesus' predictions about the future came true. But those who misinterpret this passage are missing an opportunity to prove to skeptics that Jesus is who he said he was because he knew the future. Garvey continues, "There were an indefinite number of famines referred to by Roman writers and at least one pestilence during which 30,000 perished in Rome alone. All these signs are mentioned by unbelieving writers such as Josephus, Tacitus, Suetonius, Philostratus, and Seneca, who speak of them because of their importance and not with any reference to the prophecy of Christ. When Jesus spoke of wars, rumors of wars, earthquake, famine, and pestilence, these were not signs of the second coming, but signs of the coming war of 66 AD and the destruction of the temple. And these non-Christian historians prove that Jesus was right. In the passage, Jesus tells his disciples, when you see all these signs, don't be alarmed. It's not the end, but these are merely the birth pangs. When he speaks of the end, he's not referring to the end of history, but to the end of the war, the end of the temple, and the end of the old covenant. When the temple was destroyed, it was no longer possible to keep the Mosaic law, so that covenant came to an end. And we know it's not the end of history because we're still here. History kept going after this generation he spoke to passed away. Rather, all those signs are like the first labor pains, which tell a woman that the baby's coming, but not yet. He tells them not to be alarmed at all this because now they know it will happen. Continuing in verse 9, then they will deliver you up to tribulation and put you to death, and you will be hated by all nations for my name's sake. And then many will fall away and betray one another and hate one another, and many false prophets will arise and lead many astray. And because lawlessness will be increased, the love of many will grow cold, but the one who endures to the end will be saved. And this gospel of the kingdom will be proclaimed throughout the whole world as a testimony to all nations, and then the end will come. Again, Jesus tells the disciples what will happen to them. They will deliver you up, put you to death, hate you. Did all that happen? Absolutely. We know that most of the disciples were martyred. Both Paul and Peter were executed under Nero Caesar, who died in 68. And the Bible mentions the martyrdom of Stephen and James. We know from other historical writings that the Christians were persecuted under Nero, killed by wild animals or by gladiators in the arenas of Rome. Others were crucified and their bodies lit on fire to light the city at night. Were there false prophets? Yes. Some are even recorded in the Bible. In Revelation, Jesus mentions false teachings of the Nicolaitans and someone he calls Balaam in the church at Pergamon, and another false prophet he calls Jezebel in the church at Thyatira. And we know from church history writings that many Christians did fall away. There was tremendous pressure during Nero's persecution to curse Christ and declare Caesar is Lord rather than Jesus is Lord. People were tortured, and some not only gave in, but ratted out other Christians. People will betray one another. That's what Jesus said. You see, all these things happened just as Jesus said they would. All of this prophecy is about events in our past, not about our future. Now, this last line also confuses modern people. As it's translated here, the gospel must be preached throughout the whole world, then the end will come. This has been taken to mean that we must evangelize the whole planet before Jesus can return at the end of history. To the extent that motivates worldwide evangelism, it's good, but that's a project the church should be doing anyway. Also, it's quite prideful to think that our puny efforts could stop Jesus from coming back. We don't have that kind of power over God. And that's not what this passage means. In another video, I answered, who is God of the earth? Spoiler alert, it's not Satan. I mentioned there that there are several Greek words translated world. When Jesus says the gospel must be preached in all the world, the word is oikumene, which means a household. This doesn't mean the whole planet, but the household of Caesar, the Roman Empire. We see this same usage in Luke 2:1. In those days, a decree went out from Caesar Augustus that all the world should be registered. It's saying the Roman emperor called for a census of the Roman Empire, the household of Caesar. The Romans didn't have the ability to take a census of the whole planet. There was no contact with the Mayans and Zapotec in the Americas or the Aborigines in Australia, and Caesar had no authority to number the people in China, India, or the rest of Africa. But this prediction of Christ also came true since the missionary journeys of Paul went to the ends of the Roman Empire before the end of the war. Also, Peter's sermon at Pentecost in Acts 2 mentions Jews from 16 Roman provinces were present who would have taken the news home. Messiah has come. I want to call your attention to something Jesus said to his first disciples that is still relevant to us today. In verse 4, he said, "See that no one leads you astray." As I look around today, I see many Bible teachers who are leading people astray in regard to this passage by saying wars, earthquakes, famines, and pestilence are signs of the second coming. It seems like every such event becomes a sign. Ooh, look, there's a war between Israel and Hamas. That must be the sign. But before that, it was, ooh, look, there's a war between Russia and Ukraine. That must be the sign of his coming. Or, ooh, look, there's COVID-19. That's a pestilence, just like Jesus said. And every earthquake that happens is a sign of his coming for someone. They're always wrong, but they never stop. Are you aware that about 100 years ago, there was a group saying that World War I, which began in 1914, and the pestilence of Spanish flu, which broke out in 1918 before the war was over, this group was saying these are certainly signs of the second coming and the end of history. Do you know what we call that group today? The Watchtower Society of Jehovah's Witnesses. And some of the same Christians today who are saying every war, earthquake, or disease is a sign of the second coming would look at the JWs and say, well, we know they're in a cult because they make false predictions of the second coming. What do you suppose the Christians living 100 years from now will think of these guys we have today? I'll let you decide. But I don't want you to be led astray anymore. Wars, earthquakes, famines, and pestilence are not signs of the second coming. Read the text in context and see for yourself. And later in this series, I'll answer the question, what are the signs of the second coming? But let's also put on our critical thinking cap and consider the logic of this passage. If we are meant to use these signs that Jesus gave to know when he's coming back, how useful are they to us as signs? These days, there's always a war going on somewhere, and rumors of war? That means even peacetime would be considered a sign as long as someone is nervous about war breaking out. Or how about earthquakes? These days we have seismometers measuring every little quake all over the planet. Here's a map of earthquakes that have happened in just the last 24 hours as I was working on this video. Are all these signs of the second coming? But you can download another map just like this today and tomorrow and every single day. You say, because we have global media and global monitoring, these signs are useless in our time. There's always a war or earthquake or disease somewhere, and we can know about them. These signs are not meant for us. But let's wind back the clock. Imagine you are a Jew living in Jerusalem in the 1st century AD in the Roman Empire, and you're hearing Jesus preach. Would these signs be meaningful in that context? The original context of this passage? Yes, they would. Consider wars and rumors of war. Rome had conquered so much territory and put down rebellions so hard that there existed at that time the Pax Romana, the Roman peace. Within the empire where Judea was, there was no war. Every vassal state knew it was foolish to fight against Rome. A popular saying about Rome from that time is paraphrased in Revelation 13:4. Who is like the beast and who can fight against it? So the outbreak of a war, such as the one in 66 AD, was a very unusual event in those days. And while there were probably lots of wars going on in other parts of the world, there was no global media or internet. The disciples couldn't know about all those other wars or other earthquakes, only the ones inside the empire. So while these signs are useless to us as signs, they were perfectly useful to them. By the way, if Jesus had meant them for us, you'd have to say he chose poorly. Have you noticed the false teachings always make Jesus look bad? And all the false predictions are also making Christianity look bad. Think of the mockery from atheists. There go those Christians again, seeing signs of the end time everywhere. Boy, are they dumb. Christianity certainly is stupid. These false prophets are making Christianity look bad. That's shameful. Now we'll continue through this passage in the next video, and we'll find out what Jesus meant by the abomination of desolation and the great tribulation. You don't want to miss it. In conclusion, see that no one leads you astray. These days, just as in those days, many false prophets have arisen and are deceiving people by saying that these signs are about what's coming in our future. But they're taking the text out of context. Wars, earthquakes, famines, and pestilence are not signs of the second coming in our future, but signs of the war and the destruction of the temple, which took place 2,000 years ago in our past. I remind you that this same teaching is found in Luke's gospel, which is only about the destruction of the temple. Also, we know from historians and from the Bible that everything Jesus predicted came true before the end of the war in 70 AD. It all happened before this generation Jesus spoke to passed away. Don't believe it because I'm saying it. Read the text in its original context and think it through for yourself. I pray this video has blessed you. Please like and subscribe, and please share this video with others who have been led astray, or if they haven't been, so that they won't be. Thanks for watching. God bless you all.